Good morning, Central Texas. This is Tina Capito with the Community Focus. I hope that you have your cup of coffee and you are joining us here on Prosperity Broadcast every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Today we have a special guest, Brittany Harris, and I'm super excited because one of the things I really wanted to do going into the new year was talk about how to start a nonprofit. That is a question that I get asked all the time. And so I really thought about who I should bring on the show to talk about this with. And somebody who has sat on lots of boards, who has created a nonprofit and had to run one, is someone that I think is a great guest. Between the two of us, I think we have probably over 20 years of experience running nonprofits, and that this will be a great opportunity if you are interested in learning how to run a nonprofit. So, welcome, Brittany. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and some of your nonprofit experience?
Awesome. Well, I am Brittany Harris. I am a serial volunteer in our community. I love to just give back. And so I'm one of those people you can't complain about what's going on in your community unless you're willing to help. And so I get out there and I just try to be the hands and the feet. And so just a little bit about my experience from nonprofit. Like we talked about, I've been on several boards in our community. But I've also been in the youth sports space for about 12 years, helping nonprofits, whether it's being a team manager or president or owner of the nonprofit. And so my sweet spot is youth sports. I adore being able to be the adult that I needed growing up, and so that's kind of my mission in this community is just to show kids that there's somebody that loves you in this community, that you have that support, that there's somebody that doesn't really care much about your athletic ability. They care about who you are as a person. And so that's kind of my mission, my goals, how I got started in the nonprofit space.
But you also serve on some pretty big nonprofits here in Central Texas.
I do. I do. I'm president of elect of the Killeen ISD Education Foundation. So I will be president next year. I'm president of the Special Olympics Booster Club for our Killeen ISD Special Olympics. I serve on the board of the Harker Heights Parks and Rec. I serve on the Student Health Advisory Commission for KISD. Not to mention my own board for the CTX PAC, which is the youth theater team for Shoemaker High School, and I ran the Harker Heights Junior Knights, which is the youth theater team for Harker Heights High School. I ran that program for a while as well, and so
Yeah. Well, and those are important
serial
because
volunteer, like I said.
but those things are important because as we're talking about this, oftentimes people, and I think they probably ask you the same thing. Hey, I want to pick your brain on how to start a nonprofit. And, one of my ways that I give back because running a nonprofit myself with Garden of Hope, I tell people all the time I'm poor. I'm not able to donate to your nonprofit as much as I want to. But what I do is I help other nonprofits with their strategic plans. And so I will either meet with the president or I will meet with their board of directors and I will train them on how to be an effective board. And that's kind of my way to give back into our community. Because when you run a nonprofit, it is very hard. I beg for money all the time. And so to actually be able to give money back is difficult. But I do believe in so many of our nonprofits and what they do. I believe that I can give back in a different way.
No,
And
I
so
love that.
well, and I just feel like that's my way to give back. Oftentimes people say, Tina, stop giving all your services away for free. And it's not really giving that service away for free. To me, I'm investing in another nonprofit to be successful. And I will tell you, I don't always do it for everyone. I've been asked sometimes by some, and it depends on people's intentions. I mean, I think nonprofit is a very different world. It is truly one that your reputation and who you are is your brand.
Absolutely.
And so I think that that is something that if I could have any of our listeners, no matter where you're listening from, really take to heart is your brand is your reputation. And I have so many examples of that that we can talk about throughout this episode. And this will be a series. We plan to do 3 episodes talking about nonprofit. And so today we're going to cover, do you know what the need is? Because everybody has a great idea. Do you have a clearly defined mission? And selecting a board. And then we'll go into 2 other episodes throughout the month where you are able to learn more about this nonprofit startup. So, Brittany, I love all that you do. And I just think that together we can really share some light of how to start a nonprofit. And so, the first question I want to pose is helping people find out if there's a need.
Yes. My first thing with trying to find a need is to solve a problem, right? And to try to produce something that is practical. We have this problem, this issue, and it doesn't always have to be a problem in a negative light, right? It's just, okay,
Mhm.
there is a need for this. What can I do to impact it? I am very guilty of thinking that I can do all of the things, but I have learned with some help from Tina and strategy how to kind of hone in on the things that really matter in your mission. And so for me personally, I work with the youth and it's being the adult that I needed when I was growing up. And so for me, it was going back to being that kid at Palo Alto and having military parents who weren't able to show up for my games. Who I didn't have anybody cheering my name in the stands. And so when it came to what is the need, what am I doing? I'm providing that for the kids of this community. They will know love if they are attached to anything that I'm doing. They will hear their name screamed from the rafters, no matter how embarrassed they are, you know? And so the need was just for our kids to feel supported,
Yes.
especially the ones that may not have that level of support. And so everybody, thinks Miss Brittany is extra and she's so loud and crazy. But one thing that they can't deny is that they are loved. And so that was really the need and the mission for me getting into the space that I'm in.
Well, and I think that's important because there are a lot of youth sports teams. And
Yes.
so there may not be sometimes a need for another team, but there was a need for a passion of children feeling supported, feeling welcomed, and feeling like somebody was cheering them on. And so that became the need that you wanted to fulfill. And I think that's extremely important because oftentimes there is already someone trying to fulfill a need through a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so, you want to talk about if you have a need, but maybe there's already others doing it, about some options that people could do?
Just do it. Do it anyways. Love them anyways, especially in your town. We can have a small town mindset as much as we want. There's a need for what you do. Even though somebody occupies the same space, who's to say that you all can't collaborate and create something greater? Like I said, there are a million ways to skin a cat, right? There's so many. We see this need. We can do all of the things. It's like, I want to do birthday parties. I want to do this. I want to do that. And, maybe you collaborate with those people that are in that same space. I am really big, even in my professional life, on like the competition, being friendly and working with one another. And so even with what I do professionally for a living, I speak to my competitors. I work with my competitors, and it's the same thing in the nonprofit space. The people are really the magic, and that's what we have to understand in that space, because the nonprofit sector is a mission driven space. There's not a ton of people that do it for the money. It is definitely a mission and passion driven space to be in. And
Yes.
so just because someone else is doing the same thing, that doesn't mean that they are the person that's called for it, or qualified for it, that doesn't mean that you cannot do it because somebody occupies that space, because there's enough room for all of us. There are enough kids there that need love in our communities. There's enough work to go around, I promise you. And so don't let it discourage you from starting your nonprofit, because somebody does the same thing. They're not you. You bring something unique and special to the table with your ideas and your specific mission and your goals. And so don't ever be discouraged by somebody else doing it, and don't be afraid to collaborate with that person as well. Don't view them as competition.
Well, and that one is a really big one for me because you can do something similar. Let's talk about Garden of Hope for a moment. In Garden of Hope, there are several different foster care shelters that started showing up in Central Texas. And I helped many of them get started because there's a need for children to have a safe space. And because of that, I don't view somebody as competition. I view them as filling another part of the need. I
Yeah.
do suggest that people who are working in the same space try to have a little bit more of a niche. So for us, there's another nonprofit called Brotherhood. They take teen boys. I love absolutely everything about that because
Yeah.
they are taking teen boys. Whereas we take and specialize in large sibling groups from birth through 17. Most shelters don't want to do that. There was another shelter, and I don't believe they're open anymore, but they were taking teen girls or girls above 5. It's fabulous when there are those things, but the collaboration piece comes into maybe that teen boy needs a little bit different attention and shouldn't be placed with a sibling, but they're down the street and now on the weekends they can get together and still see each
Yeah.
other. And so I think collaborating is a big thing, and you will earn so much more respect in your community when you're willing to collaborate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, if your mission and your passion is what you say it is, and you are doing the right things for the right reasons, then you have no problem helping other organizations
That's right.
be successful, because my mission is for the youth. My mission in your case is for foster children. Why would I deter someone from using another organization when my shelter is full and I can't take them?
Absolutely.
Why would I discourage a child or a family from going to another youth football team when I know that that football team may be able to service what their specific needs are, better
Absolutely.
than what we've got? Sometimes, there are other teams that are more competitive. I do lean into the experience. I like to win football games. I like to win cheer competitions, but that's not everything, for
That's
me.
right.
And so there are some families that they want that to be everything. They want a championship every year. And I'm okay with not having that every year. My
Yeah.
championship is when I'm in Target and HEB and those kids are running up to me and leaving their parents, and they're like, oh my goodness, Miss Brittany. And so some of us just have different goals when it comes to those things, and that's
And those
okay.
goals they don't have to be conflicting, and it's okay to have
Yep.
different goals. So if you're just joining us here on Community Focus Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m., I am visiting with Brittany Harris, and we are talking about how to establish a nonprofit. We just discussed, is there a need and how to fill a need within it. So let's move into talking about your mission. I tell people all the time there are two things that when you are dealing with a community that you can say, and there's not really much of an argument about. One is the mission, and one is safety. When you are talking about those two things, it is very hard to dispute those. And so when people sometimes get discouraged or when they don't know what to do next, follow your mission, establish a very clear mission. So let's talk about that. And you and I worked together for a while because you had a mission to solve the world,
And
that
still
every
do.
child and everything was going to be great and wonderful. And we
Yes.
really had to talk about what your mission was. And so,
Yes.
why don't you share a little bit about talking through that process and what that was like, really defining your mission and what your purpose was?
Yes, no, I definitely have a superhero complex a little bit. I want to save the world. There aren't enough hours in the day. And so in our minds, when we are trying to create a nonprofit, it's like, well, I could do this, well, I could do this, well, I could do this. And so for me, the biggest thing was, okay, what are you really good at right now?
Mhm.
hone in on that, perfect that, then we can grow these other branches of your idea and your mission. Once you are good and you have perfected this category of your mission, because mine is like compartmentalized. My mission is big, but like you want to keep your mission statement very short and sweet. And so, like I said, mine is being the adult I needed when I was growing up in Killeen. And so that is my mission. I could do so many different things under the umbrella of that mission. However, I'm really good in the youth sports. I'm really good at organizing events, coming up with amazing uniform designs and things like that. And so, although my end goal is a lot bigger and my mission, I have this huge vision. Right now, it's youth sports, and I can affect those things in youth sports. And some of those little things that I want to branch out into, the avenue that I'm in now gives me the opportunity to do that as well. And so I get to visit schools. I get to throw birthday parties for kids that may not have had a birthday party ever in their life. And so I get to do those things, but I really lean into one area. I try to be the expert in that area and then grow that mission or use that as a vehicle to carry out the mission or to find other people to help you carry out the mission because you can't do it by yourself. You
Well,
cannot
and,
by
you
yourself.
know, it's so important. Your mission is your foundation, and
Oh yeah.
I suggest to anyone when you are thinking about starting a nonprofit, what are you going to do? What is your mission? And you have to have a very, very clear, mission, because that is also how you're going to, attract board members. That's how you're going to attract funding. That's how you're going to attract community support. That is how you are going to be
Yeah.
sustainable, which are all things we're going to talk about throughout this series of starting a nonprofit. And I will tell you, knowing your mission is crucial. And then making sure that those involved know the mission is what will make or break a nonprofit to me.
Absolutely. Like I said, that's one of the things about keeping it short and sweet and concise when it comes to your mission. You don't want to confuse people. You don't, even though you have the most amazing ideas, you don't want to present as someone who is just all over the place, a jack of
Mhm.
all trades, master of none, you know? And so it is very, 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 very important to make sure that the people that are with you are aligned, that they know the mission. I'm in marketing in my professional life, and so that 30-second elevator speech is everything. You know, you've only got a
Absolutely.
few seconds before you lose people's interest and you lose their attention. So make sure that your mission is thought provoking and it makes people want to hear more about what you're doing for your nonprofit in your community.
That's right. And I think one thing that's really important in that mission statement is to say what you do. If
Yep.
somebody has to read it and then they're trying to think of, well, I think they do this, I think they're an animal shelter, or I think they do rescue, or I think they
Yep.
do this, you have lost that potential donor, volunteer, or sponsor pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so it's really important to make sure you have a clearly defined mission.
Absolutely.
If you are just joining us here on Community Focus Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m., I hope you have your cup of coffee. You are joining Brittany Harris, who is, as she says, a serial volunteer, but she is a woman in our community who has impacted many nonprofits. And we are talking today about how can you start a nonprofit. So let's move on to our third thing, which is selecting a board. What skill sets do you need? This one is super important, and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about this, but I have to say my phrase that I tell everybody. Sometimes people have a heart and not the time. And
Yes.
it is so important because there are so many people in your community that if they're already volunteering and they're a board member, that they are probably on 2 or 3 other boards, or they are giving their time because those are the servant hearts. That's what they're driven to do in life. And
Yeah.
so selecting a board is really important, but it's really also important to know what you need. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about that a little bit, Brittany.
So you hit the nail on the head. Knowing what you need, I think when you are selecting a board, you do need to already have like, okay, how often are we going to meet, so that the people know what level of commitment is
Yes.
required of them from the very, very beginning. And for me personally, one of the biggest things for me in selecting people on boards is having people that are willing to tell me no, and having people that are willing to tell
I
me
love that.
I am wrong, because, like I said, I'm a marketing girl. I persuade people for a living. And so I need people to say, "Ah, Brittany, I'm not sure about that." And so sometimes we can, when we do have people who are heart led and mission driven, and they may have the heart for it and not the time necessarily, it's very easy for them to say yes and not, be well versed in the ministry of no. And so for me, it's very important to have people that do have a heart for the mission, but also bring so much value to the table by having out of the box ideas, by wanting to go against the grain, by not wanting to be a yes man, and not being afraid to challenge the status quo.
And
I
that's
like
very
to be
true.
outside the box. And so I love to make sure that I have somebody on my board that's going to challenge me, that's going to check me. For my football team on my board, I've got my right hand woman, Christy, and she is willing to say, Brittany, you're doing too much. Okay, Brittany, it's time for you to say no to somebody now, and she really, really keeps me aligned. And she's like, okay, so why did you just agree to do that when your schedule and your calendar says you've got this, 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 this? You are overextending yourself. And if you're not the best version of yourself, you're not going to be the best version of yourself for the kids and the community that you serve. And I'm just like, I need that. Thank you. Somebody to reel me in. And so,
Well, and it's true. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like, people often see me in different roles, and so because I'm an elected official, or because I'm president of an organization, or I'm the, executive director, I think oftentimes people are like, "Oh, well, she must know." Sometimes I don't. I mean, sometimes
yep,
I'm not also in my best space. And
yep,
so finding board members that will tell me no is crucial. I mean,
yes.
I often have, I mean, even some of the people I work with, I often have someone who comes against me and says, Tina, no, we shouldn't be doing this, or Tina, this. And even if I'm going to overwrite it, it made me think about and maybe implement some other things to make it work better. And I need that input because,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in my life, I think people start to see the president or the founder or the elected official or whoever as the know all. And
Yeah.
that is absolutely not true. And I value when people tell me no. And I may not like it in the moment because 'cause I'm like, "But we can do this, it's
Yes.
okay." But
Yes.
when they stop and they tell you, "No," or "This isn't the best idea," it makes me stop and think because I know that I have chosen people to be around me who will tell me no.
Yes.
And you have to humble yourself when you are starting a nonprofit to know your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and your time.
Yeah.
I can do some things, but the time is not always there. And so
Yep.
I think when you are trying to select a board, you need to know, I think number 1, what are your weaknesses?
Yes.
Because you're gonna have to fill your weaknesses with somebody's strengths.
Yep.
Um, and people don't often like to admit their weaknesses, and I am the first person. Um, I will tell you, ChatGTP has made my life better because one thing that I needed was editing because
Yes.
I have 10,000 ideas. And then to get it all on paper in a way that can be explained, even though it's all my work, I needed that. And I used to have my best friend Sybil, she used to, here locally, she would go through and read anything before I sent it out because my brain is very ADHD. I want to do a million things all at one time, and I have to have somebody balance me on that.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And what is yours that you had to, like, say, "Okay, what does Christy feel for you?"
So for me, she feels that strategy piece for me, because I am the idea fairy. Like, my brain is going. a
Great
million
idea,
miles
Fairy.
a minute. And I'm like, I've got this idea. And so when it comes to actually like executing and the things like realistically that I need to do to even bring that vision to life, she is that person. She's like, okay, think about this. Like this,
Mhm.
you want to do this, but it's going to require this, you know? And she takes so much off my plate when it comes to administrative. Like you said, my brain, I will squirrel all over the place. I need somebody to proofread. And so we share an email inbox where she's like, hey, did you see that email, you know? And she does that for me because sometimes I will see it. I am the queen of mentally replying occasionally, charge it to my head and not my heart, because I really thought that I replied. And so
Yes.
she helps to be an extension of me, because I am that happy go lucky. She's a lot more reserved. And so I definitely recommend getting a plethora of different personalities. You don't want a board full of people that are only like you.
Yeah, I mean,
You
and
know,
it's
you have
so
to
true.
grow. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's talk a bit about I'm a very strong believer in having an executive board of 5 members and then having a board below them of anywhere from 5 to 10 members because
Yeah.
um one thing I have really tried hard, and I'm not always great at it, is to not wear people out. And those people who have the heart will often say yes when they should be telling you no.
Right.
And I think it's important. Let's use Educated Angels. It's a nonprofit that Sybil Mark and I founded in 2012. And we have a pretty big board, but everybody has a specialty. And what I love about it is we can basically throw an event and need nothing outside of our board. And what I mean by that is we have Donnie Engel. He owns an event venue and he has a print shop. We have Jesse Henderson who does photography. Sybil is like the best ever secretary and like planning things out. Um, Mark is the good idea fairy. We often tell him no because he comes at like 2 minutes before an event that we could do this great thing. But
Sometimes
then
you
we
cannot
have
dim the light bulb. Sometimes you have to get that idea out there in the universe. I support you, Mark.
it's hard. But then we have an educator, Natalie, on the board, and she really runs our Teacher of the Year program. And
Yeah.
so, what I will say is, if you are going to be a nonprofit that does not have a brick and mortar,
Mhm.
and that means really like Garden of Hope is a foster care agency. We have a building, we have paid staff. When you are running off of just volunteers, spread the work out and find people who have a specialty and ask them to do that thing for you. Know
Yeah.
what you need and ask a purposeful ask.
Absolutely. I have been learning that the last few football seasons, just because we are completely volunteer based. We depend on, you know, parents to help out and work concession stand. You never want to burn out the same volunteers. And so you have to really lean into like, okay, so what are you good at? Okay, that is what I need from you. For me, a big piece of it is volunteers. You will never miss your kid's game. You don't you dare sign up for concession stand during your kid's game, because you will be in the stands to cheer them on, and that's a
Absolutely.
non-negotiable, you know. And so for me, even with the like selecting those people to do those things, like even though I'm not the best at my own boundaries, help those people set their boundaries as well. Like like you won't miss anything if you have a high schooler that isn't actually involved in the organization, and we have practice. Guess what? We're going to find somebody else to bring that water to practice and to help you out, because you're going to go to the high school and go to your child's game. You're not going to be out here, you know. And so those things are just really important when you're doing that.
But that's the sign of a good leader as well. I mean, and for Christmas, I have to do the same thing. We have some sponsors and some donors who they will do anything for me. If I ask, or they will try to sign up and sponsor children for the holidays, and I tell them, you know what, this is not your time to shine. There are a lot of people who want to give during the holidays. We allow them. If I get desperate, I promise you will be one of my first calls because they support us all year long. And
Yes.
so it's kind of like I've had people who would be on our board, and I would say, I really love that you want to do that, but you're on 4 other boards. This is not for you to do right now. However, when I plan an event, I would love you to help with that one annual event. And then I still allow them an opportunity to be involved without either being a board member or somebody who is going to require a lot of time. And I try to really help balance that for people because I want people to be their best. And I think that one thing that happens in nonprofit world often is you overextend yourself and you try to do too much because you want the mission to work, but you have to be willing to also let other people um, do because sometimes we get control issues. And as we are closing this out, we're going to talk about our control issues because going into 2025, I am going to be working on mine and I'm going to have you work on yours, Brittany, that other people get to do it. We can allow other people to do it. And it may not be exactly how we want, but they're still serving the mission and it's still doing well. And it's hard because we want everything to be a certain way and we want it to be of excellence and we want all these great things. But I know that's a hard one for you. You want to talk about that? Probably not. But how about you talk about it for our listeners?
Okay, listen, sometimes when you have these control things, there's some trauma associated with it. I'm not going to lie. It is because you have had an event where, you did trust somebody to do something and they may not have necessarily executed to the best of their abilities or held up their end of the bargain or not shown up at all, and so those things have happened. But for me, it's just grace, right? It
Yeah.
boils down to grace. It boils down to showing grace to others
Mhm.
and showing grace to myself because Rome wasn't built in a day, Brittany. You do not have to save the entire city of Killeen and Harker Heights today. There are some things that are still going to be there tomorrow. It is not going to affect your mission. It is not going to affect the passion that you have for these things. Like, it's okay to let it go. It is okay to let certain things go. And so in 2025, you're gonna call me Elsa because I'm gonna let it go. Okay. We're
Well,
gonna
it
be
but, you talked about something just a second ago that really we need to say something else about is there are times that people have let us down, or there are times that people have not been able to follow through, and that's part of being a good leader to also help people identify when they cannot do it.
right.
I mean, there are times that you have a board member or a volunteer, and they've got an ill mother, and this is not the time where they have extra time. Sometimes you have to remove things off of their plate, but good open communication is what will set a board up for success. It may be that conversation. I know your mom is in the hospital. You need to be honest with me. One, do you need this as a distraction? Or two, do you need me to find somebody else to do this? And have good,
Yeah.
open, and frank conversations with people because your board is going to be those that you rely on throughout this. So it is extremely important to find a board you trust that has the skill set and that has the ability and time to put into your mission that you have clearly defined.
And they will thank you for it. A lot of times we
Mm.
do as volunteers, we get burnt out. And so sometimes people can't see the forest through the trees when it comes to their mission. And it's like,
Yes.
hey, like, I'm doing a lot, for you. And so proving and walking the walk when it comes to it being a mutually beneficial relationship
Yes.
is so essential in everything that you do. You have to let them know, like, hey, you're supporting me in this greater mission, but I want you to know that I support you too, and that your time is valuable to me, you are valuable to me,
Yes.
and your family allowing you to do it, because we don't talk about that enough, is the sacrifices that our families make for us to
Yes.
be out here in the community doing the things. I know that's for another episode, but yes.
Yes, and we will talk about those things because once you get that nonprofit started, there's so much more that goes into things, and so we'll continue to be talking about this topic over the next couple of months, and how to start it. So, if you are just joining us and missed our show today, we are talking about how to start a nonprofit. We talked about what is the need, clearly defining your mission, and selecting a board. And on our next episode, we will be talking about how are you going to fund your nonprofit, how are you going to execute your mission, and how you're going to stay sustainable. And so when you join us back again, um, get your pad and paper ready with your cup of coffee because we are going to be giving great insight on how to start a nonprofit. So thank you, Brittany, and I am excited for our next episode of the Community Focus, talking about starting a nonprofit. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Next Tuesday at 7 a.m. with your cup of coffee, we'll have another episode.
Thanks, Tina.